What if the wildest science fiction movies of the 1960s were never meant to survive? Imagine films so daring that critics attacked them and studios buried them deep. These weren't just movies about aliens or time travel. They were about control fear and rebellion. Some were banned, others vanished quietly. Yet today they echo louder than ever. Stay tuned as we uncover 14 controversial 60s sci-fi films critics tried to bury. The Damned, 1963. The Damned was too strange for its time. Directed by Joseph Losey, a blacklisted American working in Britain, it blended biker gangs, atomic paranoia, and creepy children into one radioactive nightmare. On paper, it sounded like pulp. On screen, it became political. The story begins with a group of rebellious youths who stumble upon a secret government bunker. Are children raised in isolation, glowing with radiation, yet immune to its effects? They are meant to inherit a poisoned Earth after nuclear war wipes out everyone else. The message was clear. Governments were planning for extinction. British censors hated it. The tone was nihilistic, the violence brutal. Losey was already under suspicion for his leftist politics, so the studio chopped his film to pieces. When released, it ran in a mutilated version missing entire subplots. Critics called it incoherent and shelved it quickly. Years later, film historians discovered the original cut hidden in archives. Its themes, of isolation and government secrecy, felt prophetic in the Cold War era. Losey's use of cold steel imagery and children stripped of emotion predicted the bleak tone of 70s dystopian cinema. In the end, The Damned became a ghost film. Too intelligent for the drive-in crowd, too shocking for polite critics. Yet its radioactive glow never faded. Today it feels like an omen, whispering that the real monsters wear suits, not fangs. Seconds, 1966. John Frankenheimer's Seconds may be the darkest movie ever made about rebirth. Starring Rock Hudson, it asked what if you could start life over again, only to discover you were still trapped in yourself. It was shot with invasive camera angles and grotesque close-ups by cinematographer James Wong Howe, turning every frame into a nightmare. The plot follows a middle-aged banker who fakes his death through a shadowy corporation, promising him youth and freedom in a new body. He wakes up as Hudson, a handsome painter living in California. But the freedom soon rots. The corporation watches him at every turn, controlling his life more than before. Critics recoiled. They accused the film of ugliness and cynicism. Audiences expecting romantic escapism from Rock Hudson fled theaters. Paramount panicked, pulling the movie after poor test screenings. At Cannes, the audience reportedly booed it, forcing Frankenheimer to leave the festival in humiliation. Behind the scenes, Hudson fought to keep his performance grounded, showing fear and self-loathing far removed from his studio image. It was one of his bravest roles. Yet, studio executives feared it would destroy his popularity, so they distanced themselves from marketing it. Decades later, Seconds became a cult classic. Directors from David Fincher to Darren Aronofsky cite it as influence. It anticipated surveillance culture, plastic identity, and the illusion of control. A film too unsettling for the 1960s, but too honest to die. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. It began like any other Cold War thriller, but ended as one of the bleakest visions of human arrogance ever put on screen. The Day the Earth Caught Fire told of a planet slowly destroyed by mankind's own atomic experiments. At first, critics admired its realism. Then they realized it was an attack. The story unfolds in London, where a weary journalist pieces together a terrifying truth. Simultaneous nuclear tests by rival superpowers have knocked Earth off its axis, tilting the world toward the sun. The city bakes, rivers dry, panic spreads. But there is no alien invasion this time, only humanity reaping what it sowed. British authorities disliked the film's apocalyptic tone. It suggested that political leaders were no better than children with matches. The censors forced cuts to speeches that criticized nuclear policy. Some theaters refused to screen it, fearing it would stir unrest during an already tense period. Behind the scenes, director Val Guest fought for every frame. His team shot real heat waves through the streets using orange filters and scorched lighting to simulate the burning sky. The cast endured suffocating temperatures inside sealed sets to create the sense of global collapse. The result was almost too real. When released, many critics called it alarmist, yet time proved it prophetic. Its closing shot showed two newspaper headlines, ready to print one, saying, "World saved," another saying, "World doomed," leaving fate unresolved. That ambiguity terrified audiences more than monsters ever could. Today it stands as a warning that the end will not arrive with screams but silence and smoke. Planet of the Vampires, 1965. Before Ridley Scott imagined alien Mario Bava crafted a fever dream called Planet of the Vampires. Critics dismissed it as Italian pulp, yet its influence bleeds through science fiction even now. It begins with two spacecraft landing on a dark planet shrouded in mist. The crews soon turn on each other, possessed by unseen entities that feed on fear. There are no fangs here, only shadows that slip into the living. Bava filmed it on a tiny budget using colored gels and fog machines to transform cardboard sets into visions of cosmic dread. At the time, Italian distributors worried about its occult undertones. The Vatican reportedly objected to scenes suggesting that the soul could be stolen or trapped after death. American censors demanded new dialogue to hide the film's bleak ending, where humanity itself becomes infected by alien spirits. For years, the uncut version was impossible to find. Behind the camera, the cast nearly suffocated in heavy leather suits under relentless lights. Bava used mirrors and smoke to stretch his miniature landscapes into endless alien deserts. Critics at first saw only cheap spectacle. Decades later, directors from John Carpenter to Dan O'Bannon admitted it inspired their own space horror classics. Today, Planet of the Vampires feels like a seance projected through celluloid, a vision of cosmic corruption critics once buried because it stared too long into the void and found something human looking back. The Andromeda Strain, 1969. This one terrified more than any creature feature because it felt real. The Andromeda Strain was born from Michael Crichton's clinical imagination and filmed with cold precision by Robert Wise. It asked, what if the greatest threat came not from war, but from a microbe too perfect to kill? A satellite crashes into the desert carrying something unseen. A whole town dies overnight. Scientists in sealed suits rush to study the contamination inside an underground facility. Every door locks, every corridor hums with sterile dread. The film moves like a machine, methodical and merciless. Censors objected to its use of real military terminology and classified visuals. Some critics accused it of fear-mongering during an era already gripped by pandemic, anxiety, and chemical weapons scandals. Television networks banned trailers that hinted at government cover-ups. Behind the scenes, Wise used experimental cameras capable of filming microscopic details. The cast rehearsed inside actual laboratory spaces to mimic authentic isolation. Yet the public was not ready. Some reviewers called it too cold, too technical, lacking heroes. They missed the horror hiding in its precision. Years later, the movie became textbook paranoia. Its warning about biological containment echoed through every real-world disaster from laboratory leaks to viral outbreaks. What once seemed impossible became prophetic. The Andromeda Strain was the film critics tried to bury because it whispered a truth too small to see and too large to forget. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1969. Long before David Bowie stepped into the role this earlier, British adaptation tried to tell the same haunting story and was nearly destroyed for it. The Man Who Fell to Earth from 1969 was not the sleek version audiences remember. It was darker, lonelier, and politically charged. It followed an alien disguised as a man who crashes on Earth seeking water for his dying planet. But instead of wonder, he finds greed, bureaucracy, and fear. The film dared to show humanity as a parasite, feeding off every visitor, every discovery, every dream. That was too much for the establishment. The censors targeted it quickly, claiming its tone was blasphemous and anti-government. Some distributors refused to release it at all after private screenings left executives disturbed. Newspapers called it unpatriotic for suggesting that Earth was a lost cause. The studio recut nearly 20 minutes, softening its bleak ending. The original version was thought lost for decades. Behind the scenes, director Michael Anthony faced constant interference. His producers reportedly ordered rewrites that erased the alien's sympathy and added military scenes to make it feel safer. He fought to keep the existential sadness intact, but lost control during editing. When the Bowie version revived the title years later, audiences rediscovered this earlier film, Buried by Fear. It stands now as an eerie mirror, a film that asked what if humanity met its own reflection and looked away. 5 Million Years to Earth, 1967. Known in Britain as Quatermass and The Pit, this film fused science fiction horror and theology into one volcanic vision. Hammer Films released it expecting routine monster thrills, but what audiences got was something that questioned human origins themselves. The story begins in London when workers digging a new subway tunnel uncover a buried spacecraft. Inside lie ancient insect-like skeletons. The discovery triggers psychic visions across the city, suggesting that mankind itself may have evolved from alien experiments. That idea struck too close to home. Church leaders denounced it for promoting heresy. Newspapers accused it of attacking faith. Even the British Board of Film Classification debated whether to ban it entirely. Hammer's executives panicked, cutting promotional material that emphasized its religious implications. They tried to market it as a simple alien invasion story instead. Behind the scenes, director Roy Ward Baker used haunting visuals to blend archaeology with apocalypse. Real London subway tunnels were dressed in infernal reds and blacks to resemble hell itself. The film's final act, where ancient evil erupts beneath the city, caused panic among preview audiences. Some walked out. Others sat frozen as the screen glowed with psychic fire. Over time, it became a cult revelation. Filmmakers from John Carpenter to Guillermo del Toro have cited its blend of science and spirituality. Once condemned as dangerous, it endures as a vision that dared to say the devil might live in our DNA. The Creation of the Humanoids, 1962. It looked cheap with stiff actors and flat sets, but The Creation of the Humanoids hid a message so radical, critics refused to see it. Produced for pennies by Wesley Berry, it presented a world rebuilt after nuclear war, where robots known as humanoids serve humanity, yet slowly replace it. The story unfolds through sterile conversations between humans who fear extinction and robots who only want equality. There are no action scenes, no explosions, just cold philosophical dread. But the real controversy came from its allegory. The humanoids were metaphors for minorities seeking civil rights. Their persecution mirrored segregation and social panic in early 60s America. Some theaters in the South refused to show it, claiming it was subversive propaganda. Critics mocked its wooden performances, unaware that the monotone delivery was deliberate, a reflection of dehumanization. Religious groups condemned it for implying that machines could possess souls. Behind-the-scenes production barely survived. Sets were borrowed from other films, and makeup melted under studio lights. Yet the film's dialogue reached beyond its budget. Andy Warhol reportedly admired it, calling it the most frightening film he had ever seen. For decades it vanished into obscurity until scholars recognized its philosophical depth. It questioned identity consciousness and the moral cost of progress long before mainstream cinema dared. Critics buried it because it replaced monsters with mirrors and asked who deserves to be called human. The War Game, 1965. When audiences first saw The War Game, they thought it was real. Shot like a television documentary, this film imagined a nuclear attack on Britain and the chaos that followed. It was supposed to air on the BBC, but the government banned it before broadcast, claiming it was too horrifying for the public. Director Peter Watkins used non-actors and handheld cameras to stage panic with terrifying authenticity. Streets filled with screaming families. Soldiers opened fire on refugees, and hospitals collapsed under radiation sickness. There were no heroes, only ordinary people crushed by policy and pride. It blurred fiction and truth so effectively that many viewers fainted during private screenings. The censorship came swiftly. Officials labeled it dangerous propaganda, suggesting it might cause widespread fear and anti-nuclear protests. The BBC shelved the film for almost 20 years, hiding behind claims of moral responsibility. Newspapers later revealed that the Ministry of Defense pressured them directly. Behind the scenes, Watkins was blacklisted. Studios refused to hire him again in Britain, forcing him to move to Scandinavia. His film circulated underground among activists and teachers who passed bootleg copies hand to hand. When it finally aired on television in 1985, audiences were stunned. The old film felt newer than ever, The War Game won an Academy Award for Best Documentary, despite never being officially released. It remains one of the most powerful anti-war statements ever made. A film critics and governments buried because it exposed how quickly civilization can vanish beneath a mushroom cloud. The Shape of Things to Come, 1936, revived in 1962. This one confused everyone. It was not new, but its reissue in the early 1960s sparked controversy all over again. The original Things to Come, based on H.G. Wells' vision of the future, predicted endless wars, dictatorship, and sterilized peace. When released during the height of Cold War tension, censors saw danger in its words. The restored version included scenes cut from the original, showing humanity rebelling against utopia itself. Politicians worried it mirrored nuclear fears and youth revolts spreading across the globe. The British government quietly discouraged screenings. American distributors trimmed political speeches and inserted new narration to soften Wells' attack on nationalism and blind progress. Film critics accused the studio of tampering with history. The restoration team defended themselves, saying Wells' predictions had simply become too real. In the age of missiles and fallout shelters, his dreamlike future no longer felt distant. It felt like tomorrow. Behind the scenes, archivists fought a silent war to preserve reels that studios wanted destroyed. Many believed Wells' heirs disapproved of how closely it resembled modern power struggles. The result was a patchwork release that vanished quickly from circulation. Today it is studied as an eerie resurrection, a film born twice, both times too honest for comfort. The Shape of Things to Come warned that perfection enforced by science becomes another prison. The 60s world was not ready to hear that message again. X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, 1963. Roger Corman made many low-budget films, but none hit the nerve like this one. Scientist whose vision expands beyond all limits until he can see through everything, even into the fabric of creation. What began as pulp horror turned into metaphysical terror. Dr. Xavier, played by Ray Milland, creates eye drops that let him see through matter. At first he cures patients and gains fame, then the gift becomes curse. He sees every flaw, every lie, every sin, until light itself becomes agony. The final scene where he claws out his eyes was too much for early audiences. Some theaters cut it entirely. Censors objected not to gore, but to blasphemy. The line about seeing the eye of God triggered protests. Religious leaders called for boycotts. Critics dismissed it as exploitation, failing to see Corman's intent. The film was about forbidden knowledge and the madness of omniscience. Behind the scenes, Corman shot it in 15 days under relentless pressure. He used tinted lenses and distorted lighting to show the collapse of human perception. Milland reportedly stayed in character between takes, walking blindly around the set to capture the despair of seeing too much. Over time, X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, became legend. It inspired generations of filmmakers from Sam Raimi to Guillermo del Toro. What critics tried to bury for its audacity became one of the first true visions of cosmic horror, a film that dared to ask what happens when man looks beyond the light and finds darkness staring back. Alphaville, 1965. Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville was unlike any science fiction film before it. There were no sets, no lasers, no spaceships. It was filmed entirely in modern Paris using real architecture to represent a futuristic city controlled by a computer called Alpha 60. The result was surreal and frightening because it felt real. The story follows secret agent Lemmy Caution as he enters Alphaville to destroy its dictator, a sentient machine that bans emotion and poetry. In this world, logic is law and love is rebellion. Goddard turned the Cold War obsession with order into an existential nightmare. Critics expecting traditional science fiction hated it. They called it pretentious and incomprehensible. French authorities worried it mocked bureaucracy and state control. American distributors refused to release it, widely claiming audiences would not understand its political subtext. Censors tried to cut dialogue where Alpha 60 discusses suppressing free will, saying it sounded too close to real propaganda. Behind the scenes, Goddard shot guerrilla style without permits. He filmed inside corporate offices at night to create the illusion of a totalitarian city. The cast, including Eddie Constantine and Anna Karina, worked without full scripts, improvising their lines against Goddard's cryptic instructions. The film baffled viewers, but inspired artists, philosophers, and directors across the world. It predicted surveillance culture, emotionless bureaucracy, and the mechanical language of modern politics. Alphaville was the film that critics tried to bury because it said the future was already here, hidden behind glass walls and fluorescent lights. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. At first, 2001, A Space Odyssey was called boring, confusing, and pretentious. Critics walked out at its premiere. Some papers printed mocking reviews saying Stanley Kubrick had lost his mind. But behind the chaos lay a revolution. Kubrick's vision of human evolution, artificial intelligence, and cosmic destiny was too advanced for its time. The film followed astronauts who discover a mysterious monolith on the moon that triggers a journey beyond the stars. Its dialogue was minimal, its meaning vast. Viewers expecting action were confronted with silence. Religious groups denounced it as heretical, claiming it replaced God with technology. Scientists debated its accuracy. The studio panicked when early screenings emptied theaters. Kubrick refused to explain the ending, where astronaut Dave Bowman transforms into the Star Child, saying only that it was meant to be experienced, not understood. Behind the scenes, Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke built real models of spacecraft and used rotating sets that made actors walk on ceilings. The filming was grueling. The studio wanted narration to clarify the story, but Kubrick fought back, deleting it. When critics mocked the slow pacing, he trimmed 19 minutes and re-released it. Suddenly, audiences changed. Young people lined up again and again, claiming it felt like a religious awakening. What began as a flop became one of the most influential films in history. It redefined science fiction, philosophy, and cinema itself. Critics tried to bury it, but it refused to die. 2001, A Space Odyssey became proof that the future belongs to those who dare to dream beyond comprehension. These films were not just entertainment. They were warnings, whispers, and revolts. Critics tried to silence them. Truth has a way of surviving celluloid. Each one shows how art outlives fear, how vision outlasts censorship. Which of these forgotten 60s sci-fi rebellions shocked you most? Let us know below, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more hidden histories.